Imagine holding a PhD level physics exam in one hand.
Right, and like a really simple draft of an email to your boss in the other hand.
Exactly. And the artificial intelligence that can effortlessly score, a 94% on that physics test will probably write the most robotic, unnerving email you've ever read.
It really is wild when you put it like that.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive. We are talking directly to you today because if you have a $20 bill burning a hole in your budget every month to spend on an AI assistant.
Which a lot of people do right now.
Yeah, totally. Well, the landscape you thought you knew just shifted entirely.
It really has. We are looking at a fundamental rewrite of what $20 actually buys you in late March 2026.
Yeah.
You're no longer just buying access to a clever chatbot. You are essentially deciding which type of digital brain is going to sit next to you while you work.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to demystify these heavyweight AI subscriptions so you can figure out exactly which tool fits your unique brain and your workflow.
Because the options have totally changed.
They have. We've got a freshly translated, freshly updated dossier in front of us. It compares the newly launched ChatGPT Plus.
Which is now running GPT-5.4 Thinking, by the way.
Right. Comparing that against Perplexity Pro, which just added Claude Sonnet 4.6 and Gemini 3.1 Pro to its roster.
That's a huge lineup.
It is. And the source material uses this brilliant analogy to set the baseline for us. It says, ChatGPT is essentially the iPhone of the AI world.
Ah, I love that comparison.
Right. It's one seamless, highly predictable ecosystem where the hardware and the software are just, built for each other.
Yeah, totally integrated.
Meanwhile, Perplexity Pro is like an Android device. It's modular. You get to swap out your brain-choosing Anthropic, Google, or OpenAI depending on the exact task you're trying to accomplish.
That analogy perfectly captures the core philosophy of these two platforms. Let's look at the ChatGPT Plus side first.
Let's do it.
When you pay that $20, you are buying into a deep native integration. You get GPT 5.4 Thinking, which just launched on March 4th.
And it's incredibly powerful.
Super powerful. And OpenAI is being really generous with the compute power here. They're giving you up to 3,000 messages a week.
3,000? Wow.
Yeah, but what's really interesting is how they divide that access into three distinct gears or modes.
Okay, break those down for me.
So first, you have Instant running on the older GPT 5.3, which is designed for quick, no hesitation answers. Think of it as your rapid-fire conversationalist.
Got it. Just quick back and forth.
Exactly. Then you have Thinking Standard, which balances that speed with a bit of internal logical processing. And finally, you have Thinking Extended.
And that's the heavy lifter, right?
Oh, absolutely. In extended mode, the AI essentially isolates itself to meticulously grind through highly complex multi-step problems before it ever types a single word to you.
So that's the iPhone approach. You get one very powerful brain, but you get to decide how hard it concentrates.
Precisely. Now contrast that with Perplexity Pro. Perplexity doesn't even want to be called a chatbot.
Right, they hate that word.
They do. It defines itself as an answer engine. Its absolute default state is running real-time web searches and providing mandatory citations for every single claim it makes.
Receipts for everything.
Exactly. But the real draw for that $20 subscription is that it acts as a universal adapter. You get access to the absolute best models from 3 rival tech giants.
Which is kind of mind-blowing.
It is. You can use Claude Sonnet 4.6, Gemini 3.1 Pro, and GPT 5.4, all under one single subscription roof.
Wait, hold on. Let's look at the math on that for a second.
Sure.
If I am trying to balance a software budget and Perplexity is giving me Claude, Gemini, and GPT for $20,
Right.
I mean, buying those 3 subscriptions individually straight from the developers would cost me $60 a month.
Oh, yeah, easily.
So why would anyone ever buy ChatGPT Plus on its own if Perplexity is essentially handing you a $60 value for a third of the price?
Yeah.
What is the catch here?
It's a great question, and the catch comes entirely down to the friction of using a wrapper versus a native ecosystem.
A wrapper?
Yeah.
Like it's just a shell around the model.
Exactly. Yes, Perplexity gives you access to the GPT 5.4 model, but it's piping that model through its own interface. You are not getting the seamless proprietary environment that OpenAI designed specifically for that model.
Oh, I see.
You lose the massive 3,000 message limits, you lose the deeply integrated voice modes, and most importantly, you lose the persistent personal memory that ChatGPT builds over time.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
It really is the difference between renting a high-end sports car for a weekend drive versus owning it and tuning the engine, the suspension, and the seat exactly to your specific body.
The value is there,
Mm.
but the environment is compromised.
Exactly.
So if we understand what we're actually buying, we need to transition to how these tools fundamentally fetch their answers. Because the way they access reality is completely opposed.
Right, the architecture of information retrieval is totally different. ChatGPT, by its very nature, relies on its vast internal memory. You have to imagine it as an entity that has essentially read billions of books, articles, code bases, and transcripts up to a specific cutoff date.
Just absorbing everything.
Yeah, it holds all of that in a compressed conceptual web. It only goes out to search the live internet if you explicitly command it to, or if you trigger its specialized deep research mode.
Whereas Perplexity is the exact opposite.
Totally. It was built from the ground up to instantly open a web browser the millisecond you ask a question.
So to put this in human terms for you the listening, ChatGPT is like a brilliant, tenured professor writing an academic article purely from their vast internal knowledge.
I like that.
They're just sitting in a leather armchair in a closed library, synthesizing years of study from memory. But Perplexity is the frantic investigative journalist.
Running around the newsroom.
Right. The moment you ask a question, they are sprinting into the archives, pulling fresh files, cross-referencing live data, and slapping a folder on your desk with sticky notes pointing to the exact primary sources.
That is a very accurate visualization. And you can see this philosophical divide clearly when we look at their premium research feature.
It's the deep research stuff.
Yeah, take the deep research function. ChatGPT Plus grants you 10 of these massive queries per month.
Just 10.
Just 10. But because it acts like that professor, it excels at taking a complex topic, synthesizing the data, and formatting it into a beautifully structured, highly analytical document.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. Now, Perplexity Pro gives you double that capacity, 20 deep research queries a month for the same price, but its approach is purely journalistic.
It's faster.
Much faster. It focuses on raw speed, iterative searching, and aggressively pulling from hundreds of live sources to generate a comprehensive, heavily cited report in just 2 to 5 minutes.
Wow. And Perplexity also fills the gap between a quick question and a massive research paper with something called ProSearch, right?
Yes. ProSearch is arguably their flagship feature, and you get 200 of these a week.
200. That's a lot.
It is. Instead of just matching keywords like a traditional search engine, the AI acts as an intelligent research assistant. In a span of 15 to 30 seconds, it interprets the nuance of your question, silently opens 10 to 30 different websites, reads the actual text on those pages.
In real time.
In real time, it synthesizes a cohesive answer and presents it to you with inline citations. You aren't handed a list of blue links to click on. You're handed the finished synthesis of all those links.
Okay, let's talk about the consequence of that.
Right.
Because this fundamental difference in fetching data directly impacts the biggest flaw in AI today. Hallucinations.
Oh, yeah. The elephant in the room.
Right. If ChatGPT is relying on its internal compressed memory and Perplexity is anchoring to live web pages, how does that change the reliability of the truth they give me?
This is a critical distinction for anyone using these tools for professional work. We really have to elevate our understanding of what a hallucination actually is.
Okay, go on.
When ChatGPT is relying on its internal knowledge, it isn't fetching a grounded fact from a database. It's essentially calculating the next most mathematically probable word based on the billions of patterns it learned during training.
So it's guessing beautifully.
Exactly. That is why it's so prone to hallucinating. It can stitch together incredibly convincing, logically sound paragraphs that are entirely false just because it's prioritizing linguistic patterns over factual reality.
But Perplexity works differently.
Right. By anchoring its generation to the text of a live web link it just opened, it is heavily constrained. It is much, much harder for it to make things up because it's forcing its language model to only summarize the text provided in the citation.
So if I need pure, unadulterated facts with receipts to prove it to my boss, Perplexity wins because it's chained to the live internet.
Unquestionably.
But if I want pure logical reasoning, say I need to untangle a complex theoretical problem where I don't need external crutches, ChatGPT wins.
Exactly. Which brings us to a massive evolution in how these models actually process that pure logical reasoning.
The transparent thinking stuff.
Yeah. The dossier highlights a major shift in late March 2026. The move from the AI as a black box to transparent thinking.
Right, because historically you ask an AI a question, it pauses for a second, and then a wall of text appears.
Yeah.
You have no idea how it got there.
You're just blind to the process.
But GPT 5.4 Thinking is changing that dynamic entirely.
It really is. GPT 5.4 Thinking actually exposes its internal blueprint to you before it generates the final answer. You literally see it outline its logic on the screen.
Like step by step.
Yeah. It will output, like, first I will consider variable X, then I will test variable Y against it, and finally I will synthesize Z.
Okay, let me push back on this because reading the dossier, I found this feature a bit baffling.
How so?
Well, if I have to sit there, watch the AI build a plan, and interrupt it mid-thought to correct its course,
Yeah.
aren't I just micromanaging the AI?
I get that.
I mean, if I have to hold its hand and tell it how to think,
Mm.
doesn't that completely defeat the purpose of paying for a smart assistant? I might as well just do the work myself.
I understand why it feels that way at first glance, but you have to look at the scale of the problems GPT 5.4 is designed to solve.
No.
It isn't micromanaging, it's steering a massive cargo ship before it hits an iceberg.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Think about previous models. You might give the AI a highly complex coding prompt. It would sit there for 3 minutes, burn through thousands of tokens of compute power, going down a completely wrong conceptual rabbit hole.
And you wouldn't even know until it finished printing the answer.
Exactly. You wouldn't know it failed until you read the final output. By exposing the blueprint, GPT 5.4 lets you step in at second 5 and say, stop, you've misunderstood the core premise, adjust your focus to variable Z.
So it's just saving time and money.
It saves an immense amount of time, frustration, and processing power.
Okay, I see the utility in that. It's course correction before the damage is done, so that's how OpenAI handles transparency.
Right.
But what if I'm using Perplexity and I select Claude Sonnet 4.6 as my brain? How does Anthropic approach this?
Claude Sonnet 4.6 takes a much more conversational approach to transparency. It essentially thinks out loud.
How does that look?
As it processes your prompt, it writes out step 1, step 2, and its working conclusion in a very readable, human-like flow.
So it's not a rigid blueprint.
No, it feels exactly like sitting next to a highly competent colleague at their desk who is verbally walking you through their logic as they work. It's incredibly easy for a human to follow, audit, and trust.
So Claude is thinking out loud next to me. But if I switch my Perplexity brain over to Google's Gemini 3.1 Pro,
Oh, Google.
yeah, Google historically loves to hide the magic. Are they letting us see under the hood too?
Yes, but in a highly engineered way. Gemini 3.1 Pro introduces 3 distinct selectable levels of thinking: low, medium, and high.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. But when you crank that setting to high, Gemini will spend the longest time thinking of any model we've discussed today. It dives incredibly deep into the underlying logic of a prompt.
But can I read it?
That's the trade-off. Its reasoning process is much less structured and much harder for a layperson to read and follow. It is raw, deep computation, making it immensely powerful but significantly less transparent than Claude's conversational style.
Which perfectly sets up the most fascinating contradiction in this entire dossier.
The paradox.
Exactly. We know how they think, and we know how deep they can go. But when the researchers actually tested how smart these models are, the results are totally conflicting.
Yeah, it's a huge divergence.
You have a massive split between academic intelligence and real-world utility.
The researchers actually refer to it as the paradox of intelligence. Let's look at the standardized academic benchmarks first. The tests designed to push AI to its absolute limits.
Right.
On the GPQA Diamond, which is an intensely difficult test of PhD-level physics, chemistry, and biology, Gemini 3.1 Pro absolutely dominates the field. It scores a 94.3%.
That's unbelievable.
It's essentially passing a doctorate-level exam almost flawlessly. It also leads the pack on ARC-AGI-2, which tests abstract spatial adaptation, and it leads on the HLE.
Let's define the HLE for the listener, because that sounds intense. Humanity's last exam.
Right. The HLE is not just a standard test. It's a highly specialized gauntlet designed by global researchers specifically to find the exact edge where AI reasoning completely shatters.
Like questions made just to break the AI.
Exactly. They are uniquely difficult for machines, but solvable by human experts. And Gemini performs the best there, too.
Okay, so Gemini is objectively the smartest entity in the lab. But here's the contradiction.
Yep.
When we look at the GDPval Elo rating, which measures how these models perform in the real world on practical, everyday tasks based on human preference, Gemini drops to dead last with a 1317 Elo.
It falls right off a cliff.
And meanwhile, Claude Sonnet 4.6 takes the gold medal at 1633 Elo.
Yeah.
Okay, make it make sense. How can Gemini essentially pass a PhD physics exam flawlessly, but finish dead last when I ask it to do my actual job?
Because it forces us to ask what intelligence actually means in a business context.
Okay, elaborate on that.
A PhD physics exam is incredibly rigid. It relies on objective, mathematical, immutable truths. But business isn't a physics test.
Right, there's rarely one perfect answer.
Exactly. If you ask an AI to explain your company's EBITDA, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, in simple terms for a new intern, or if you ask it to draft a non-disclosure agreement that protects your assets but doesn't sound aggressively robotic to the client.
It takes finesse.
Yes. Those tasks require practical understanding, nuance, empathy, and a natural human tone.
Ah, so Claude is winning the real-world Elo ratings because it actually sounds and acts like a normal, highly skilled human worker rather than a calculator.
Exactly. The source material explicitly notes that Claude Sonnet 4.6 writes like a seasoned journalist. It utilizes a natural pace, it varies its sentence structure, and it employs vivid imagery without being overly flowery.
It just sounds human.
It sounds remarkably more natural than the GPT or Gemini series. Furthermore, in coding, specifically iterative coding, where you are asking the AI to fix a bug or add a new feature to an existing code base, Claude is blisteringly fast.
How fast?
It clocks in at 44 to 63 tokens per second.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, a token is roughly 3/4 of a single word. You can think of it as a single syllable of AI thought. So Claude is spitting out dozens of words a second.
Right. It is practically 2 to 3 times faster than the competition for those iterative, everyday coding tasks.
So to visualize this, Gemini is the absolute untouchable genius locked in the ivory tower who can solve the mysteries of the universe.
But can't figure out how to operate the office coffee machine.
Exactly. And Claude is the highly effective senior manager who just gets things done efficiently and communicates beautifully.
That is a perfect summary. And GPT 5.4 sits comfortably in the middle. It's the absolute best choice for entirely novel, unique coding problems from scratch, where you need that deep structural blueprint thinking we talked about earlier.
So if ChatGPT is your personal secretary, remembering your quirks and your long-term goals, how does a tool like Perplexity, which relies on swapping brains, handle massive document uploads without losing its mind or forgetting what you just asked? We need to talk about context windows and memory.
Definitely. The context window is simply the AI's short-term working memory. It's how much text it can hold in its head at one exact moment. And this is where Gemini 3.1 Pro absolutely flexes its engineering.
This is wild.
It is. It has a 1 million token context window. In human terms, that is roughly 1,500 pages of text.
That is staggering. So if I'm a lawyer, I could literally take a massive 10-year litigation history, hundreds of PDFs, court transcripts, email chains,
Dump the entire thing into Gemini at once.
and ask it to find a single contradiction from a witness in 2018, and it wouldn't lose the thread.
Exactly. It can ingest the entire universe of that specific problem in one prompt. By comparison, Claude holds 200,000 tokens, which is about 300 pages. And GPT 5.4 holds 128,000 tokens, or roughly 190 pages.
Which, to be fair, 190 pages is more than enough for 90% of what anyone listening is doing on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Oh, absolutely. It's plenty.
But short-term memory is only half the battle. What about long-term memory? Not just what I paste into the chat today, but what the AI remembers about me tomorrow or next month.
This is perhaps the single biggest differentiator for your daily workflow. ChatGPT Memory is explicitly designed to remember you.
As a person.
Yeah. It remembers your name, your preferred formatting style, the specific projects you've been working on, the tone you like in your emails, and what you discussed 3 months ago. It builds a persistent, evolving profile of you that lasts up to a year.
And Perplexity doesn't do that.
No.
So if I'm writing a novel over the course of 6 months, and I need the AI to constantly remember my characters' backstories, the tone of the world, and the plot points we decided on weeks ago, is Perplexity going to forget who I am every time I log in?
Yes, and it will probably drive you crazy for that specific use case. Perplexity handles memory through something called Spaces. It is strictly project-based.
How does that work?
You create a space, let's call it Q3 Financial Analysis, and you upload 50 documents into that specific folder. Perplexity works brilliantly within the context of those 50 documents, but it has absolutely no long-term memory of you as an individual user across different sessions or different spaces.
So they serve totally different purposes.
Exactly. For long-term, highly personal workflows, ChatGPT is the ultimate personal secretary. Perplexity is the ultimate reference library.
And regarding Perplexity's library skills, the dossier notes a major UI update they just rolled out in March 2026. They completely redesign how you focus your searches. Why does this UI change actually matter to the user?
It matters because it fundamentally changes the quality of the data you get back. Perplexity moved their focus modes to be front and center right under the plus icon in the search bar.
Okay.
You have the default web search. You have academic, which forces the AI to exclusively search peer-reviewed journals. You have social, which taps into Reddit and X for real human sentiment.
That's super useful.
It is. But crucially, they introduced a dedicated finance mode. By forcing you to click finance before you search, it completely restricts the AI to SEC filings, official stock data, and corporate reports.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it strips away all the Reddit rumors, the marketing blogs, and the noise so you get pure, unadulterated financial reality. ChatGPT has absolutely no equivalent to this hyper-focused, verifiable financial lens.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground. We've decoded context windows, we've broken down why the smartest AI writes the worst emails, and we've explored the friction of memory versus real-time research.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. It's time for the final verdict. If someone listening is looking at their budget right now, what is the ultimate conclusion of this late March 2026 dossier?
The expert consensus is that the ecosystem has become too specialized for a single winner. If you have $40 a month, the ultimate professional stack is actually to subscribe to both.
Both. Wait, is it actually realistic to have two different AI tabs open all day and constantly switch between them? That sounds like a lot of mental friction.
It is a context switch for your brain, for sure. But you have to think of it like walking from your desk to the corporate library.
Okay, I can picture that.
You use Perplexity Pro as your primary research engine. You use its Sonar model for instant verified web searches. You use its access to Claude Sonnet 4.6 for generating your daily content, writing natural emails, and doing fast, iterative coding. And you use its access to Gemini 3.1 Pro for those rare moments when you need to upload a massive 1,500-page archive.
And then you walk back to your desk, which is ChatGPT Plus.
Exactly. You reserve your $20 for ChatGPT Plus, specifically to utilize GPT-5.4 Thinking for those deeply complex, entirely novel coding problems.
In the memory.
Yes, and you use it as your persistent personal secretary for any long-term project where the AI must remember your personal context, your style, and your history over the course of an entire year.
It really comes back to the idea that there is no objective best tool anymore. There is only the best tool for the specific problem you are trying to solve in that exact moment.
Right. You are not just buying a piece of software, you're assembling a team of highly specialized digital workers.
You really are.
And that actually leaves us with a rather profound implication to consider as we wrap up.
Lay it on me.
Think about the sheer volume of personal and professional data these systems are now casually handling.
Oh, it's immense.
If Gemini can effortlessly ingest a 1,500-page archive in a single prompt, and ChatGPT is designed to remember your personal preferences, your writing style, and your strategic business decisions for an entire year.
Yeah.
We are rapidly crossing a threshold. We are approaching a point where these AIs are no longer just static tools you query for a quick answer. They're becoming digital partners that possess more context, more history, and more raw data about your daily life and your business than your closest human colleagues.
Wow. Yeah, the AI sitting on your phone literally knows the context of your ongoing projects better than the person sitting in the cubicle next to you.
Right. And when your digital assistant knows your professional history, your blind spots, and the exact trajectory of your project better than you do yourself, you have to ask, who is actually guiding whom?
That's a wild thought to leave off on. We started this deep dive by talking about the murky landscape of a simple $20 subscription.
And it turns out it's way deeper than that.
It is. The real complexity isn't the pricing tier. It's the fact that you are paying to invite a memory, an analyst, and a massive library into your daily workflow, and you just have to hope that you remain the one steering the ship. Until next time, keep exploring.